everyone, this is Dr. Liz, and you're listening to Include with Dr. Liz. This show is about everyone, all people, including you. It's about people and their diverse lived experience in this world. I chat with guests to get to know them, their identities, and their inclusion needs, so we all have an opportunity to understand how best to include them, so together we can create a world where everyone thrives. Kanika is a dog walking, Kilimanjaro climbing, extroverted but alone time needing, neurodiverse technical change consultant. Inspirational to others, Kanika identifies as a gender, ethnic, and racial minority with a developmental disability and a chronic illness. Her superpower is the ability to bring enthusiasm and excitement to an alternative way of seeing the world's problems, which she gets to use for good in her non-executive role for a housing association with a large, diverse group of urban residents. Welcome, Kanika.
Hi, nice to be here.
Kilimanjaro, I had to Google it. It's like 19,000 feet tall or over and takes between 5 and 9 days to climb. I'm sorry, but what?
Yeah. It was a bit high. I mean, so this was before I discovered I had a heart condition. So I had a heart condition at the time and still climbed it and had no idea. Yeah, there was very little air was the big thing. But I didn't notice because I had a heart condition, so I didn't really know because I'd functioned with very low oxygen.
But the further you went up and the less oxygen there was, surely there was some evidence it was thin air.
I should probably do more research into it. But I think the thing about it is if you function with, so I have heart block. So my heart was previously before diagnosed beating about 28 beats per minute. So your body gets used to not having enough oxygen and you function. And then you go up to high altitude, there's very thin air. And subsequently, actually, I didn't really get particular altitude sickness because I was like,
Yeah, how many days did it take you?
So I did about 6 days. So I did the longer route, which was great. So kind of slow and steady. And then you summit on the final day. Well, I say day, it's like 3 a.m. And I remember, having kind of music in my ears and everyone thinking, people make assumptions, right? Who's going to be at the front of the pack, who's going to be at the back, where are you going to go? And it's, the guides have been watching you the whole time to see how you're going to cope. And I think they were quite surprised because I just kept moving. I had music in my ears. I was off. I was going. And I was just like, I'm off. I did get to the point where I couldn't feel my hands anymore and I couldn't zip up my coat. And this guy came over to me and literally wiped my nose, zipped up my coat, pulled me together and was just like, keep going. And I did, and I made it. And it was incredible.
That is so good. Okay, so today's not about mountain climbing. We're talking about inclusion, right? And so I've sent you a survey or a questionnaire in advance, and there was a big long list of identities to see if you identified with any of them. And I think there was about 6. What were they?
So female, gender minority, ethnic minority, racial minority, developmental disability, and chronic illness.
Just because you sort of doubled up on it then, I think it's worth talking about where you said ethnic minority / racial minority. Can I ask you about that? Because I talk to a lot of people here in the US and they talk about racial minority a lot. In Australia, we don't really tend to talk about racial minority. It would be about ethnic minority. How is it for you in the UK?
We talk ethnic minority. I think so. When I was growing up, you would say I am an ethnic minority. It's probably kind of the term we would use. Probably racial, we wouldn't usually use. It's very new for us to talk about race in that way. I mean, it's interesting because I think when I was younger, actually there weren't very many books about race, British race issues or British race politics or social politics really to do with race. None that were particularly kind of relevant or current. It's only really in the last few years that those have come up. Often what would happen in the UK is we would read American books about race, and that's where all the kind of discourse was. So I think only kind of in the last 10 years, I think it was the first book I ever actually read, which was about a Black female experience that was British, was Slay in Your Lane. And it was just the most amazing moment because I think I hadn't realized that I hadn't ever read a book about me for me before.
Kanika, if you could see through, like I have goosebumps from head to toe.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to shake those off. Tell me more about what it's like to finally read something about yourself, perhaps never ever realizing that you hadn't read something about yourself.
Yeah, it was see, I want to cry a bit now. It was incredible, I think, because it made me feel less alone. I think I hadn't realized that I had that emotion. You spend so much of your life just reading other people's stories and narratives, and there's bits of that you can relate to. But this book talks about issues at work. It talks about issues in relationships. It talks about issues with politics, and and interestingly, it was talking about people who were older than me who'd had similar experiences to me. And I think that, people talk about like role models. Oh, role models are so important. Everyone marches around and talks about role models. But I was like, I actually realized that I didn't quite know that those people existed. Those people who'd walked that same path as you. I think I'd felt like I was alone. I mean, I have friends who have similar lived experience to me, but not anyone who kind of gone before me. Really, not in the UK. There's kind of famous sports people and famous singers, but it did feel like I didn't have that connectedness to people with a similar experience in media, in stories, in books. And it made me sad for the past, but it also made me really joyous about the future, because I thought, I walk past schools now and kids are walking out of school with like a big afro. You could not have worn an afro at school when I was younger. They would have been like, why will your parents not do your hair? What's wrong with you? No one looks after you. Da, 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 da. I can't help but have hope, because these younger people have things that I never had. It's the same as, people talk about the internet being evil. I think the internet's incredible. I love it because it's just full of spaces where you can connect with people who have similarities to you in a way that, when I was younger, there was nowhere to, other than kind of an auntie, no one could teach you how to do your hair. Now you can go on TikTok and someone teaches you how to do that. Someone with exactly your hair type. It's incredible. I am sad about the fact that I didn't have it, but I'm also grateful that it's here.
Okay, I have to pause for a second because I'm not coping. Like I don't know, I'm welling up with tears. So it's not helpful. All right. So thinking about the whole of Kanika, we've just talked a bit about, the racial and ethnic minority part of it, but the whole of you, and you did mention about connectedness. Throughout your life, have there been times when you felt significantly disconnected or left out or excluded?
There'd be a couple of moments. I think one of them would be when thinking about whether you've been treated well in a certain situation. And then often I would reflect on that looking back, but also when comparing that to other people's experiences. So when you speak to somebody else and you go, and then this happened, and someone goes, oh my goodness, that's just awful. And then you think, oh wow, like I just coped with that. I didn't realize that was normal. So even things like, when you go on holiday and someone says, I'm really excited to go on holiday, and they know you're going on holiday. So they're like, are you counting down to going on holiday? And I'm never excited about going on holiday. I'm not excited about going on holiday because I have to go to an airport. If I have to go to an airport, I have to go through security. And I don't like security. There's a number of reasons why. One of them is because I've got a heart condition, which means I can't go through XYZ scanners. But it's also because I know it's one of those moments where I'm in a space where the engagements with me are often, I believe, linked to kind of different types of profiling. And I know I tick too many boxes. And whether it is that I'm treated badly when I'm there, I've had a few bad experiences, or whether it is that actually I'm concerned about that, that's not a safe place for me mentally. And actually every holiday I go on, I'm not happy until I get through security and I'm drinking coffee on the other side. That's where I feel the difference. It's the same as if something happens in the streets. I live in like a predominantly kind of black area in Manchester. And I love it. I can buy my hair products. I can see people who look like me. You can play music and no one thinks that's unusual. It's very, very, lovely community. But if I walk down the street and something is happening, I don't look, I look away, because I don't want to be a witness to something and have to engage with police who may then decide that I'm an issue. So it's really interesting, because actually it isn't until you voice that over that actually other people go, that's not normal. You shouldn't have to worry about that. That's not a concern for you. I'm not involved in any crime. Why am I worried?
Yes.
I should be able to be a witness. I'm sure I'd be a great witness. But I'm like, I don't want to engage. I don't want to, because I'm worried. So I don't have various different examples of kind of instances where it's been really pointed. It's more about that kind of fear and that self-limitation that comes from worrying that actually every space isn't for you, authorities aren't for you.
That is, like, it is such an awakening for me. I hear your story about not looking if you see something or hear something that's going on that you just don't want to be involved in. The identity of me as a woman at night walking, I wouldn't be looking, because like I just want to keep to myself, because I don't feel safe just in the street, because I don't know what's happening. I'm not thinking of the next steps, which you're also having to think about, not just being female, but you're also having to think about racial profiling of the police. That's just another layer, right? That makes it even further complex and more complicated for you. So, right, powerful and quite a learning moment. Where have you felt most included? You just said your community where you live feels great because you've got access to you want. You can see people like you, that look like you. But where else have you felt really included, and why was that?
So I've worked in organizations, a few organizations, but more likely teams. So there's teams where, not even you've known them for a really long time, but actually they see the all of you. So not just respecting your experience as a woman of color, as a woman who is neurodiverse, who can get overloaded, but sometimes comes in with all the energy and the ideas. It's the whole of you. So your lived experience, career wise, all of those types of things. It's not about everybody getting it right, and it wasn't perfect. We weren't all the same. Yes, we're all women, but that's not everything at all. We came from very, very different backgrounds, very, very different kind of work experiences. But it was that ability to kind of to offer challenge and to be able to use your voice. I think that the ability to kind of go, I don't think that's right, and for your boss and your peers to hear you.
It's really important for us, obviously, all to be able to see, hear, and physically access what we need. So whether that's in life or in work, you only said before, living where you live, you can get access to the hair products you need, right? It seems perhaps trivial to some people. Women understand it. We don't even have to be a woman of color to understand the importance of things that make us feel good about ourselves. But what other kind of resources do you need access to thrive?
The kind of geographical access, I'd probably say the ability to get access to hair products, to have access to hair salons that can do the same hair as you would be doing, even kind of, and this is going to sound odd, but like being able to buy the meat you want to buy, cut by the butcher in a certain way. So like I would make, curry goat, and in the UK you can't get goat, so everyone buys mutton. You can't buy mutton in an area that doesn't have people of color. And you can't buy mutton from an area unless they've got people of colour, and for them to take the fat off it in the exact way that I want it done, unless you have someone who understands, I want the bone, but I also want you to remove the fat. And it sounds daft, but actually, you want the ability to just run out of your house and go and pick that up. Kind of in a community, for me, being connected to and close to people who have similar lived experiences of you as you makes such a massive difference to whether you feel at home. So when I walk down the street here, I know on a Sunday I can smell people cooking, Sunday dinner, and I know what Sunday dinner that is, and I can smell the spices, and I know that someone's mum, auntie, whoever has been in the kitchen since whatever time of the morning after church. That is homely to me. And, even so, I live in an area where I just border where the carnival is. So the Caribbean carnival is done in the park near my house. When carnival happens every year, it's like a massive celebration. But to feel so connected to what is quite a kind of hub and an event in the kind of Caribbean calendar down here is incredible. But I think, beyond that, I suppose there's the other bit, which is that, I'm not just a person of color, I'm also, a woman. And I also want to be, if you said to me, would you move to the country, and asked me why I wouldn't, it would be because I also want my local hot yoga gym. And, I want the ability to get in and out of town safely, on public transport, without having to drive everywhere. I want the ability to use an Uber taxi to get in and out of town so that I feel safe. I suppose for me, being around um, not just people who are like you, the things that you specifically need without having to work too hard, but also environments within which you feel kind of safe and that you feel like you have belonging. I know that when I walk into a restaurant, a bar, wherever, I go in and I check, what is this room about? Where are these people from? Is this welcoming as a space to me? And that is not just checking, how is the server engaging with me? Are they making eye contact? Are they not? Are they looking at me like I can't afford it? Are they looking at me like I do or don't belong? What's that engagement like? What's the environment like when it gets in? And that's not just about money. So in the UK we talk about, it's not just a class thing here.
Yes.
It's also about that. What kind of environment is it? And I suppose I choose to live in this space because actually I have access to spaces that I know will be welcome. Yeah, went to a folk gig, Cumbria, and we're all at this gig in this kind of barn. And I think I must have been like 15, And I remember turning to my auntie and I said to her, why is everyone looking at me and not the stage? But I don't want to go to a gig where people look at me.
Maybe you're just a really good dancer.
Maybe I wasn't dancing though.
Okay.
I wasn't sure about the folk music. So, but either way, it was that thing. And it's interesting that you say that. So my mother always used to say, when people stared at me, she'd go, "It's because you're so beautiful, Kanika." And I just needed her to go, "They've just never seen a person of color, Kanika." I just needed someone to say it and lean into it. But I think it is that thing about feeling welcomed and normal.
So I was at Coachella last year. I was in one of the events right in the mosh pit, and just to my left, not too many meters away, was a group of guys dressed in drag. And one of them in particular, his makeup was on point. Like, this guy had the most beautiful cheekbones. I mean, and I couldn't stop looking at him because of how beautiful he was. Like, I was just mesmerized by his beauty. But I was hyper conscious that people would normally look at him for other reasons, right? So I'm trying not to look, because I know people look for the wrong reasons, but I wanted to look because I was admiring his beauty. So I'm hyper conscious of that. And I probably, thinking back on reflection, I probably just sort of should have gone up and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Oh my God, beautiful."
Absolutely. And I think it is one of those things. I mean, we all do it, right? We all do that thing where we go, I really admire something about that person. And I think especially if they're different from you, you're more likely to see something in them that is just particularly interesting, attractive, because I think difference is really attractive. Someone who's, hasn't got the same hair as me, or, that is really interesting. People will come up to me and go, I really like your hair. And just like that one thing, and then they kind of walk on and you think, well,
Made my day.
Exactly. Thank you. Absolutely.
You'll walk on a cloud for a week on that compliment.
Exactly.
You mentioned before about Afro being something that wasn't okay. And I mean, to me, it seems absurd. Then I am always conscious of making sure I don't always make a point of my friends that are Black or African American, particularly, because they get to change their hair so dramatically all the time. And then I'm like, oh, but it's beautiful. Like, what have you done? Like, oh my God, it's amazing. But I feel like every time I see them, it's their hair that I'm talking about. Like, I've really, I don't know. I don't know whether I've swung my pendulum to heightened awareness that stops me being authentic at the same time.
As a person who funds, and spends that time, I think you should just absolutely crack on with
Okay.
compliments.
Opportunity, right? So do you feel like you've been given the opportunity to thrive and succeed at work? Or do you think there could have been more that could be done?
I think I've just gone self-employed because I don't believe that the opportunity is there to thrive and work.
Tell me
And that
more.
makes me really sad. Makes me really sad that
Mm.
I suppose for me, it always kind of comes back to, a little bit like that Taylor Swift song, where she goes, "If I was a man, though, would it have come across that way?
Yeah.
Would you have been worried about that?" And I think, I am one of those people who works, a stupid number of hours because I love to work. I love working. It's, I find it really joyous. Um, but I think what I have experienced is that often when feedback is given, so a good example would be on my graduate program, when we went in to do our review, which is, with the leaders of the organization, I think I was wearing like a kind of polo neck black suit. Like, I'm talking about what I'm wearing because I'm thinking about them. What I'm wearing changed how they perceived me, which is, the bit that gets your head. And I went in and I was talking about change management, commercial benefits, literally talking about how we claw back, revenue and, get revenue and reduce costs and da, da, da. And the feedback off the back of that to me was, she's not very commercial. I think there was a number of different things going on in the room, but the feedback to other people who I had heard their presentations, when they hadn't mentioned anything around that, was significantly more positive. We always do ourselves down a little bit, but there was that thing about, I knew that, whilst I had gotten opportunities out of it, I hadn't been seen just for what I'd offered. I was the whole package. Like we do, we all perceive people based on, how do they walk into a room, how do they present themselves, what are they wearing, and I think that, I came across as, not kind of, ready for a kind of commercial setting. And that was a big offense for the graduate program. If you're not commercial in the graduate program, you may as well, jump a cliff. I've had some really, really good opportunities from women who've gone, "You're really good." And interestingly, I've never really been mentored by a man, but I've met a number of women who've gone, "You should come with me to that place," or "I want to move you into this role," or "Why don't you apply for that?" Or "Have you talked to them?" I found that actually the female leaders are absolutely incredible at it. And, I always say to people, if you need a job, go and find, a woman you used to work for, because she will not forget.
It's so funny you say that because I had the complete opposite experience.
Really?
And I am wondering now in the US that I'm finding there's a different culture. It must be an Australian cultural thing that
Yeah.
I had the least amount of support at the executive level from other women. Yeah. But here, everyone wants to help you, regardless of gender. So maybe it's just no one wants to help anyone in Australia. I don't know.
I hope not. That'd be real unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I also think, and I mean, this may be too deep for
Nope.
whatever you're about to put out there. But I think what I've found, and I was thinking about whether I really wanted to be honest and say this because it could be a bit divisive, but I have been supported and sponsored by a lot of predominantly white women. Okay, I'm saying predominantly to be nice, white women. And actually, what I found is that they see you and they see your talent and they want you to work for them. And then what I often found was is that that would work really well for a period of time, and then there'd be a moment, and it's almost kind of a moment of tension, where I think actually I always felt like I'd moved from being really useful to being a bit threatening. She's gotten a bit good now. I'm now really wary of it, at this point in my career, where if anyone wants me to be their pet, it's a little bit like, I'm going to take her in, I'm going to grow her, it's going to be great. And, she's going to do all these things. And, she's going to be this, this brown woman that I made a success. And I just run so fast. I'm like, I'm going out, because actually it's the wrong relationship. I think opportunities should be about, getting somebody who, yes, has that passion and really wants to do the work and is really up for it. But I also think there's sometimes a kind of unnatural engagement sometimes. And I think it's because female leadership can be very hard and people create that network, but actually what's that appropriate relationship and dependency? Because I think you don't ever think that your life choices are a bit like a statistic, but actually I realized once I'd gone self-employed and loved it, that I was like, wow, I'm that person who left employment because there weren't the opportunities I really wanted. And I didn't want to have to lose my authenticity to that. I think I knew. So if I'd stayed in the organization I was in, I could have survived, but I would have had to have changed my leadership style, as I was saying before. I'm not standard, and I don't want to almost kind of change my leadership style to be kind of hyper masculine in an attempt to conform to whatever that kind of culture is. Would I go back? I would go back to employment, but I think I'd be very, very careful about the culture that I wanted to go into. Now I've been free.
I mean, yeah, you've made me self-reflect, because I was self-employed since 2006. It's quite a while now. And then every now and again, a client would say, come and actually work for us. And then the minute you're employed, everything changes. And I lose myself because I am direct and honest and curious and questioning. And that doesn't really work as an employee so much, quite career limiting, which is going to take me across to talking about what's the ideal working environment for you.
It's more the culture. I don't need to be in a Black-led organization to feel included, or a female-led organization to feel included. I just need to be in one that goes, that sees me as a whole person. And I think a lot of people think, well, that means what we do is we talk to Kanika about her personality type and her work type. And I'm like, no, I'm also the person with braids and the person who, is going to talk about have run out of moisturizer and I can't, do you know what I mean? There's something about also seeing me as a person of color and a woman and a person who's neurodiverse and all of those things.
Choice of language and words. Have you ever heard people talking around you that have made it very clear that you didn't feel safe or included because of what they were saying and how they were saying it?
More that my choice of language would be problematic.
Oh, tell me about that.
There are certain environments where I know that I am not feeling included when I adapt my language to fit. So I'm naturally quite direct. I've been in rooms where I've sat next to my boss, who's a woman, and not a woman of color, and she will say something that's very, very direct. And if I was to say something in the same way, it would be problematic.
Right. Okay.
And I suppose, and because I am quite casual, I'm quite to the point, I am perceived in a way that's different. So I adapt my language in certain situations, sometimes because of how it's perceived, sometimes because of how people respond to that. And I can read that because, I have some level of emotional intelligence and that you have to kind of change or adapt the way in which you're speaking.
Your identity and beliefs. Have you ever felt disrespected? Have you ever been a moment where you've been really affronted and gone, wow?
Yeah. So and it's interesting because it's not what people do, it's what people don't do that's the most offensive. When Black Lives Matter happened in the UK, I was part of a number of different spaces, so work being one of them, where it felt to me like there was something really important about recognizing what was going on outside in the world, because when other terrible things happen, we recognize that. I was very upset anyway, and there was space for that. There was kind of, if you're upset, you go, but there wasn't any kind of conversation. And I have to say, it was probably one of the most offensive things I've ever heard. The silence was absolutely terrifying. I felt like I was in a space where, how can you care for me and care for what I do and what I bring to work, to friendships, and not care for this issue, because that issue is me and I am that issue. That's me and my children and my lived experience. And to say nothing it felt offensive to my identity. I felt I was so hurt. And it was really interesting because I did say something because I'm grown up, right? So I said, are we going to have some conversations about this? And it was really funny because the leadership at the time were just like, they said, we feel very uncomfortable around this topic. What do you think we should be saying? I think I was more upset because there's something about getting past yourself and what makes you feel uncomfortable, and recognizing that it's better to say something than nothing. And it's better to get it wrong and then try again than to do nothing. It's a bit like, I remember when I hated school, and my mother used to come and knock on my door and go, "Are you gonna go?" Because I got to the point where she couldn't drag me.
Right.
And I remember about 8:30, she'd knock on the door and she'd stand there and she'd say, "So the inaction is action, right? So you choosing not to move is you choosing not to go to school. So don't lie to yourself." She's like, "You can stay here. I'll go to prison and they'll find me. You can stay here, but inaction is action. It is a choice to do nothing." And I think that
let's just say someone's listening and they're reflecting back to that same time when the Black Lives Matters protests were occurring. And they also recognize they didn't say something or do anything. What could they or should have they done? What advice would you give them?
For me, the really important thing at that time was about taking that moment to really hear, to engage and to really listen. So not to the stupid, Twitter debate, but to really see some of the really good, really clear stories and people who gained platform at that time, to really talk, not just about, the George Floyd, instance, but also the wider issues that were going on in society. I think it would have been to show curiosity, and then to continue showing that curiosity in an appropriate way. I always think, it's really interesting because, your friendship group very much usually reflects you and your beliefs. So I think there's probably a moment of looking at your friendship group, your family group, and going, do I actually have access to people who show me different experiences? If you had friends who were going through that, I suppose it was saying, and people did say that to me, they said, I've seen this and I'm absolutely mortified. And, if that's what you felt, and to express what you were feeling. Or even I had people say to me, which is incredible, they said to me, I've seen what's going on. I'm really sorry. And it's awful. And I'm here to support you if you need it. But as well as that, my journey is I need to go and do some reading because I don't know enough about A, B, and C. So I'm going to go and do that now. Take time, reflect, do something. I don't even think it's about performatively being a supporter. I think it's about knowing and recognizing when it's time to do the work, because we all don't know everything, right?
Absolutely. I wonder if we could simplify it for people. Would it have helped if I was your colleague at work at that time and I'd said to you, I've seen what's going on. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do to support you? Would that have helped?
Yeah, it would. It would. You spend so much time as a person of color thinking that you need to navigate around the system and you need to change. And I think I had realized when Black Lives Matter happened, I was like, oh, I didn't create the system. And actually it's not my duty. I can choose to be part of this fight, but it's not my duty to fix it. And I suppose I felt like people offering support, absolutely, that's incredible and absolutely what you need. But there was also a thing about people recognizing that they needed to reflect on where their head was at and what they knew and what they didn't know and what work they needed to do. That was the powerful bit for me. So a lot of people said to me, "How are you?" But more than that, the people who went, "I'm going to go and do this," not because I need you to be grateful for it, but because I'm on my journey.
Yeah.
That was so powerful.
Is there any specific support that would better help you to thrive in a workplace environment?
I suppose a culture of supporting people to gain opportunities and to grow. I like a good program. Put me on a path, and I'll just do the path. That'll be great. We all learn and take in information in different ways, and we all communicate slightly differently. And actually, what I found is that it would be an organization that is open to adapting depending on different people and different styles and what they need.
Thank you so much, Kanika. It has been fabulous. You've taught me so much today. And If I had to think of at least 3 things that I think that you've taught me today is, firstly, your very wise mother who said that choosing no action is actually choosing an action. And I think that's really important for all of us when we're talking about inclusion, is if we choose to do nothing, and for whatever reason we choose to do nothing, it is walking past something and really demonstrating that we're accepting that as being okay. So that's not okay. Another one I would say is, you've really highlighted my privilege to me today when you've shared that layer of intersectionality for you. You know, when you're walking down the street and something might be going off on the side, you don't want to pay attention to it, not just because you're protecting your own safety, but you're also protecting yourself from the people that are meant to keep us safe. And so I want to apologize for that. And then thirdly is about taking accountability for what we don't know, like just recognizing we don't know everything. We don't understand everybody else's experiences. Go learn, go seek out the knowledge. Don't make it your job to tell me what I need to know. Go learn it and then take some action and responsibility for making a difference to the system. So thank you for teaching me those things today.
It's been lovely speaking to you.
Kanika Selvan is Director of Beetroot Consulting, a networked business delivering change strategy, delivery and thought leadership. With the mission to demystify technology for organisations and individuals, Kanika offers a less conventional range of services, making top-tier consulting accessible, inclusive and impactful.